Good morning. My name is Nihal Hasnain, and thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to present our research in the Conference of Innovation in Language Learning. Uh, my presentation will be about development of a recommendation panel for Wordhyve Language Learning App. Before I go to my presentation, I would like to thank the co-authors for this paper. Here will be the outline for my talk. Let me begin with the background of this research. This research fits in the area of ICT for language learning, particularly development of ICT for vocabulary development. So when we talk about learning a new language, vocabulary comes at the first place because vocabulary is known to be the core component of any language, whether it's a native language or it's a foreign language. Because without having a significant knowledge on the vocabulary, it is really hard to express our ideas. It is also hard to communicate. Also, it is hard to read any documents written in a foreign language. Therefore, it is really necessary to acquire significant amount of vocabularies. In the traditional classroom, vocabulary is not often given much emphasis on. It is because there is a common belief between the instructors that vocabulary is something that has to be learned after the class. Therefore, in a traditional language learning classroom, vocabulary is often given as a homework so that the learner can learn it in their free time. Therefore, over the last couple of decades, we have seen a massive development of mobile learning tools or web-based language learning applications that meant to be supporting foreign language learners in developing their vocabulary. We have also observed the adoption of ubiquitous and sensor technologies. It is because there are two key benefits. First of all, this kind of sophisticated technologies gives the learners to learn anytime and anywhere learning facilities. Also, this kind of technologies often let capturing different kinds of data. And with that data, the researchers can analyze and try to understand the learning process of the language learners. It is in the vocabulary learning scenario, it is also important to connect between the formal learning and informal learning. It is because a language instructor wants to know how the learners you use the newly learned words in a real life learning in a daily life situation. So for example, if you learn a word in the classroom, you need to use it in a real life context. Therefore, we need to have some kind of sophisticated technologies that can bridge the gaps between in-class activities and outside the class activities. As I just mentioned, over the last one or two decades, there have been massive development of language learning technologies. Therefore, we can see several research systems, for example, PSI, UEVL, Scroll, or photo studies. On the other hand, these days, we can also find many commercial applications, for example, Anki, Rosetta Stones, or Memrise. These tools also use cutting-edge methodologies, for example, AI or spaced repetition methods for teaching vocabularies and also understand the language learners' learning process. Let me give you an example. For example, Google came up with their solution called Google's Word Coach. So in this application, for example, if you want to learn one word, for example, cook, the app will give you some other words that you could possibly learn. So it uses different kind of strategies. For example, it uses quiz or it uses gamification. It also uses image-based feedback so that the learner can learn not just one word, rather they can have more they can have scopes to learn more words. By doing that, Google aims to enhance foreign language learners in enhancing their word learning scopes. The team that I am working with, we have been also working on building several language learning applications. However, in this paper, we basically reflected on our latest development, which is Wordhyve. I will explain it in a minute. So we started building this application from this year, and it is a native native Android application. With this application, we basically wanted to capture intentional vocabulary learning experiences, and we wanted to recommend intentional vocabulary learning, intentional vocabularies that the learner can potentially learn in the future. So why incidental vocabulary? And let me just give you a quick introduction. What is incidental vocabulary? So in language learning pedagogy, incidental vocabulary learning refers to the words that you do not intend to learn at the first place. However, you learn it in the process of learning something else. So in language learning, it is really important to learn more incidental vocabulary along with intentional vocabulary. So far in the literature, incidental vocabulary learning happened using different learning contexts. Also, vocabulary learning could happen when you watch television, also read newspaper or read a book. However, in our research, we wanted to build a language learning environment where learners can learn incidental vocabularies along with the intentional vocabularies. And also in this research, we consider learning context as a key because learning context refer to where the learning actually takes place. And it can be inside the classroom, it can be outside the classroom, or it can be just in a cultural situation. Because learning context often give the meaningful learning for the learners. So therefore, we also focused on learning context support in this application, because in a traditional language learning applications, it is found that language learners are reluctant to describe their learning context by themselves. For example, we analyzed one of the data sets that is available in the research community. It's called Scroll dataset. So the dataset has around 30,000 learning logs. So when we analyzed the logs, we found that only 10% of those learning logs were created using the learner described learning context. So this means that learners are often not so willing or not so happy to describe their learning context in every single word they want to learn. Therefore, we wanted to come up with a solution that maybe the app can give them some potential learning context as a recommendation, and let the learner choose what are the context they would like to choose to learn with. So here are the interfaces for the application that we are building. It names Wordhyve, and it uses various multimedia annotations, for example, images, text, translation, voice data, and also different kind of contextual clues to support word learning. Let me explain a little bit more about this application. So like any other application, in this app, we also have a user registration UI. So here you basically need to input your name, email address, set a password. You need to define your native language. You need to also define the languages that you want to learn. Also, you need to set your date of birth and the places where you usually learn. And of course, using the geographical location tracking, we also keep tracking every single word that you learn. So once you finish the registration in the app and sign in with the right credential, it will lead you to the LifeLog UI image, like LifeLog UI. So here you basically can input the word that you want to learn here, and also this is an alternative. It is an optional option. For example, you can describe the learning context where you want to learn the word. Also, you can skip it, but you must input an image, because the analytics at this point uses images as one of the key key logs. So when you input an image, the word that you want to learn, and also the learning context where the learning is taking place. And when you click on the log analysis button, it will take you to the recommendation panel that we developed in this paper, for this paper. And what, let me explain a little bit more what the recommendation panel does. So in the recommendation panel, the learner will get several recommended words. So these words, what we address in this research are the incidental vocabularies. So these words comes after the analysis of the scene that you input when you created the log. Also, the analytics of this app analyzes the whole scene of the image along with the EXIF information in order to generate several smartly generated learning context. So smartly generated learning contexts are the alternatives of the learning context a learner can use. So once a learner choose the words they want to learn in the future, and then they just chose those words and save, and then it will be stored in their learning history. And that's the key feature of the recommendation panel at this point. So here is the technical specification of the app. So we are using several image analysis models. Currently, we are primarily using Microsoft's cognitive vision services. Also, we are using Megviz's deep learning APIs. In the backend, we use Firebase as the database, and the app is developed with Kotlin as a programming language. So here are the data that we capture and analyze for improving the analytics features. So we, of course, use demographic data, for example, the nationality, occupation, age, the gender, and what are the places the learner often use to learn new vocabularies. Also, we use the log data. So log data means the kind of word you want to learn, whether it's a concrete noun or it's an abstract noun. Also, the kind of image that you input for representing the word that the learner wants to learn. Also, the learning context. So we use a little bit of NLP to understand the learning context. Also, the time and the current learning location of the log data, from the log data. So let me summarize my talk. In this paper, we basically added a new feature to the Wordhyve Language Learning App. So the new feature is a new recommendation panel. So in this new recommendation panel, the app recommends incidental vocabulary and also the smartly generated learning context. And we also, in this app, we also use different kind of learning data for building the analytics. However, there are several limitations of this research that are yet to solve. And of course, we would like to solve them in the future. So one of them is, at this point, we're using image-based image analytics AI. However, from the viewpoint of language learning science, there could be several questions that we could face. So for example, the reliability of the AI, particularly for the description of the context. Also, the accuracy of the AI in terms of detecting the object. These are the issues that we could face from the viewpoint of language